All right, all right, all right. Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios, and today we are going to be going over drum grooves and how to create drum loops and drum tracks for your projects when you're creating music. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to cover just what is a drum kit, and to do that, we're going to go ahead and bring up a drum instrument here. And today we're going to be using Steven Slate. Just setting my input to my my MIDI keyboard and my output to master. Again, we may go over signal flow in the future, but for today, that's not super important. Today we are going to be covering how to put together the drum grooves, rhythms, and things like that, but we're also going to go over what a drum kit is. So this is Steven Slate, and we're going to just go ahead and Steven Slate drums. It's a drum software package you can get. There's lots of these things that are out there. I like Steven Slate. They're great, but any drum software library is going to be of high quality these days. So it's not super important that you're using Steven Slate or Addictive Drums or whatever. Like, you can use any drum library you want as long as you're getting the drum sounds you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a random drum kit here. And we'll just do maybe this alternative drum kit, because why not? Okay, so this is a acoustic drum kit. These samples were recorded in a studio and then mapped to the software, so that what happens is when you click on the kick drum, that's what the kick drum sounds like. That's how it's recorded in the studio. And there are different kick drum sounds that you can choose from. That's not super important right now. We're just going to go over the basic elements of this kit today and how to put together drum grooves. We'll also go over the difference between an acoustic kit and an electronic kit, as it can factor into the type of music you might be doing. So the first element here is this kick drum. This is the kind of the lowest frequency information that you're going to get from a drum kit, and it sounds like that when you hit it. And it's usually on the floor. And if it's a real drum kit, you see this little floor pedal. What a drummer would do is they'd step on this pedal, and it would move this beater, and that beater would hit the kick drum, and that's how that sound is created. The second element of most drum kits is going to be the snare, and that's this guy right here. And so you can hear it has kind of like a snarey sound, kind of punchy. And then you have your toms. These are going to be generally called your rack toms, and they can come in all sorts of sizes and tones. It's not super important, but just recognize what a general tom sound is. And so you have your rack toms, which are called racks because they're usually put on a rack on top of this kick drum, and they sound like this or something similar. And then you have your floor toms, and they're going to be down here, usually sat on the floor. And they're usually going to be a little bit bigger than your rack toms from a diameter standpoint. And so this kit has 4 toms. You're not always going to use 4 toms. Oftentimes 2 is plenty. That being said, sometimes I've seen some drummers will use 12 or 20 toms, and that's all fine, good, and well. That's not super important right now. We're just trying to analyze the individual elements of a drum kit. And the reason we're using an acoustic kit is because even electronic drum kits are based off of the same principles. So we have our kick, our snare, and then our toms. Next is going to be a hi-hat, and that's this guy right here. And there's another pedal here, as you can see, that a drummer would step on, and that would create when they step on this pedal, it closes the hi-hat, and when they release this pedal, it opens the hi-hat. We'll go over that in a moment, but This is the hi-hat sound. Kind of clicky and cymbally, but that's a closed hi-hat sound. Then we have a ride cymbal, which is this guy right here. And it's got kind of a shimmery sort of sound. It's got a tail to it. And then you have your crashes. Your main crashes are these two guys right here. And crashes are usually used to emphasize beats or create emphasis on certain parts. You also have this little crash cymbal, which is actually called a splash cymbal. But it's just a smaller version of these guys. And then this is a China cymbal, which is a little bit different timbre or timbre, timbre, whatever, however you say the word, from your traditional crashes. And those are the fundamental pieces of the drum kit, all right? Our kick, our snare, our toms, our hi-hat, our ride, and then our crashes, slash splashes and chinas. All right, so now we're going to go over how the different elements of these can be applied when you're putting together a drum track. And to do that, we're going to go into our piano roll view. Now, what's happened is this particular program or software has been mapped to the piano roll. You can remap this if you so desire. I just leave it as default, and as a default, the kick drum is on C3. All right. The snare is going to be a combination of these, and there's different sounds that you can get from a snare, depending on how you play it. And so different, for instance, if you were to take a stick and instead of hitting directly on the center of this snare, and instead were to hit on this the rim side of it, you're going to get a sound that's more like this. And that's just when a drummer takes the stick and instead of hitting it right on the snare head itself, he's more hitting the rim of the snare. And so that's called a side stick. Then you have the crack in the middle of the snare. And then you have something called a rim shot. And a rim shot is a combination of hitting on the side of the snare and also in the middle of the snare. It's a subtle difference, but you can hear it. And then, so you can hear the difference of those sounds. These are all coming from the snare, but depending on how you hit the snare, you can create different, slightly different sounds. Next, you would have the toms, and like I said, these are default mapped the way they are. So like and I just leave them default. But you have your toms. So here's your lowest floor tom is here on that F, and then as you go up, the toms will go from here to here. So all right. There are various mappings for the hi-hat. In their most basic fundamental element, you have just that right there. Then you have the sound of the hi-hat closing. So that's when a drummer would be stepping on the pedal, not hitting the snare, but just literally stepping on the pedal, which would close the hi-hat. And then you have the open hi-hat. So if you were to hit an open hi-hat, you'd get that. And then if you were to close that open hi-hat, you'd get that. And if you were just to hit the hi-hat as it's closed, you get that. And then you have your crashes and rides. And then as you come up here, we're getting into more of the intricacies of this. This is not super important to know right now. It's just going to give you some options and how you can get sounds and get your drums to maybe sound a little bit more realistic if you're going for a realistic acoustic drum sound. But these up here are going to give you more of various ways of like, it's hard to explain without a visual aid, but you can have the hi-hat be completely closed. You can have it be kind of closed, but not really, or you can have it all the way open. And then these are going to give you kind of the in-betweens between fully closed and all the way open. And as you go up, there's all other sounds too, like tambourine, claps, cowbell. So you can have some fun with this drum kit. Not all drum kits are going to have all of these sounds, but all drum kits are generally going to have like a kick, a snare, a hi-hat, an open hi-hat, a closed hi-hat, your ride, your crash, your toms. And so once you understand the sounds that the drums make, you can start to incorporate them into a drum groove. And generally speaking, there's going to be there's a lot of different types of drum grooves out there, but I'm going to try and simplify this as much as I can. What we're going to do, first of all, because this is not coming out super loud, I'm just going to go ahead and put a limiter on this drum kit just so that we can get a little bit more volume out of it. It's not super, if you don't know what a limiter is, that's fine. It's not super important. I'm just making these drums a little bit louder. And go even a bit more here. Okay. All right, so hopefully if you couldn't hear these sounds before, you can now. So we're going to start with the hi-hat. The hi-hat is kind of the main timekeeper of your drum kit, and there are different patterns you can use. We're going to stick with super basic patterns today, and those patterns are quarter note patterns, eighth note patterns, and 16th note patterns, all right? And a quarter note pattern is just simply a hi-hat is going to be hitting on every quarter note. As we went over last week, we went over how each of these is a measure, and they're split into quarter note parameters here, right? Or quarter note lengths. Anyways, so this bar right here, from here to here, is a quarter note. From here to here is a quarter note, etc. And then 4 quarter notes makes up one measure. So a quarter note pattern on a hi-hat looks like this. Now, when it comes to drum samples, the length of these midis don't actually matter. If I had them set here to 16th notes, it's going to sound the same as if I had them holding out for whole notes. It doesn't matter at all when it comes to drums, what the length is, because all it's going to do is trigger the hit of this of the percussive element that you're going for, and that's just going to be what it is, okay? So what I do tend to do, and this is just my own personal preference, is I try to make everything as uniform as I can. So I might make everything look like an eighth note just to keep it visually consistent, essentially. But there's no reason that you couldn't do this if you wanted to. If it made sense to you, that's fine. It doesn't actually change anything. But just for the sake of my own sanity, call it OCD, call it what you will, I just prefer to have everything be uniform looking in length, even though the actual length has no bearing on what's happening to the note. So when it comes to drums, if you had like a piano or some other kind of MIDI instrument, the length would actually matter. But for drum samples, it doesn't matter at all how long these notes are. It's always going to sound the same. So anyways, getting back to it, we're going to start with a quarter note hi-hat pattern, and that's just essentially the hi-hat is hitting on every quarter note, and that's going to sound like this. Oh, I forgot I have the metronome on. We're going to turn that off for now. But the metronome is also hitting on every quarter note. That's how a metronome keeps time. So this is a quarter note hi-hat pattern. Pretty simple. And that's just hi-hat happening on every quarter note. Next, we have eighth note hi-hat pattern. And that's going to sound like this. All right. And it sounds a little bit faster. And then the last one we're going to touch on today, because these are the basic patterns for hi-hats. You can go into syncopations and things like that, but for now we're just going over the basics of how you would create these grooves. And this is a 16th note hi-hat pattern. All right. Now, what you'll find is that very few drummers hit a hi-hat at the same intensity as they go. Oftentimes what happens is they're going to hit the first one loud and then the second one a little bit softer. So what we want to do is we're going to go in and we're just going to lower the volume of every other hit just a little bit. And this is going to give it more of a natural feel. All right. And that's our quarter note pattern. And we're going to start with the basic quarter note pattern. And then we're going to, I'll show you how the 8th note and 16th note patterns can come into play later. So we have our basic hi-hat pattern right now on a quarter note. And then we're going to put in our snares. And the snares are always going to, well, not always, but as a general rule, you cannot go wrong if you put your snares on either the second quarter note or second beat of the bar and the fourth beat, or you can put it on just the third beat, and we're going to go into that in just a moment. Right now we're just going to stick with the putting it on the 2 and 4, and if we were to play that, it would sound like this. All right. Now we're still missing an element, and that is the kick drum. Now, generally speaking, the kick drum is always going to happen on the downbeat or the 1 of any measure. As a general rule, this is not, there are no rules, I guess, but like this is a common thing that you'll find in music, is that the kick drum will most often play on the 1 beat. And then there's a little bit of leeway where else you can put it. So for instance, a very simple pattern would be to put the kick on the 1 and the 3. So 1 and 3, 1 and 3. And when we play it, it's going to sound like this. And that's fine. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But for me, that's a little dull. And so what I would maybe do is move the kick a little bit one way or the other. Maybe we'll move it just over a little bit. So we'll have the first kick still be on the 1, but our second kick, we're going to move just a little bit off the 3. And we're going to see how that sounds. And that's adding a little bit of variation, but it kind of sounds a little off. So if we move it one more to the left and see how that sounds. And that sounds a little bit more interesting. You can also move that second kick over to just to an 8th note in between, like this hi-hat and the snare here. So the third beat, but like the 8th note of it, the and. So if we count this out, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, as we discussed in previous videos, you would put it on the and of 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and. All right, and so if you put the kicks on either the 1 or the ands of the bar, you'll find that it often works out pretty well. We can even add extra kicks in here if we want to give it a little bit more information here. All right. Or you can just simply put it on the 1 and you get this. And so what you'll find is that the kicks oftentimes tend to work very well on the beat itself or the and beat of a bar. All right. And that's just a general rule. You can play with this. There's no set rules. It's whatever sounds good to you. But as just a general guide, if you're just starting off trying to put together a drum track for your first time, if you put it on the 1, 2, 3, 4, or the and of those beats, generally speaking, it's going to sound all right. And then we have our quarter note feel up here with the hi-hat. So one other thing we can do with the hi-hat is give it an 8th note feel. So we're going to keep everything here the same. I'm just doing this because what we're going to do, a very easy trick, is when you go there, you can bring down the volume of all those hi-hat hits together. And again, this is going to make it a little bit more humanized feeling. If you do every other hit down in velocity or volume, it's going to make that hi-hat feel a little bit more like a real drummer was playing it. So that's just a pro tip for you there. But now this is an 8th note feel on the hi-hat, but the kick and the snare are still doing the same thing. And so that almost feels a little bit faster, doesn't it, when we add in that eighth note pattern on the hi-hat. And so you could imagine that if we were to add in a 16th note feel, which we're going to do here in just a moment. And then we're going to, again, I'm just visually showing you what's happening, but I'm bringing down the hi-hat on the second, every other hi-hat hit just a little bit in volume, just to give it that more human feel. And all of a sudden it has more of that, a quicker groove almost. The tempo has stayed the same. We haven't made the song faster or slower, but you can hear what the hi-hat is doing to the rhythm here between the quarter note, the 8th note, and the 16th note. And depending on what kind of song you're doing, you can determine what's most appropriate at what point. You can always have the drums go from an 8th note groove to a 16th note groove or vice versa. So why don't we try that actually? We're going to just take the same drum pattern, but we're going to go from a quarter note feel to an 8th note feel to a 16th note feel, just so you can kind of hear what's going on with the drums as you were to go about doing this. And we're just going to lower the volume of that a little bit. And so here we go. All right. Maybe a good idea to show right now, quarter note means that there's 4 hi-hats. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 in a measure. An 8th note has 8 hi-hats in that measure. And a 16th has 16 hi-hats, or beats, or whatever you want to call it. But there's going to be 16 hi-hat hits with a 16th note pattern. There's 8 hits with an 8th note pattern, and 4 hits with a quarter note pattern. So you can kind of start to see how this is all working out with the rhythm. And you can change up the drums between sections. So maybe our first section here, we want this kind of thing. And then on the second one, we want this kind of thing. And then on the third one, we'll actually add in an extra kick hit. and you can start to see what's going on here. All right, and so you can start to see how these get put together. So the next thing we're going to cover is we've discussed having the snare on the 2 and the 4. So what happens if we were to keep the same drum kick pattern here, but now we're going to put the snare just on the 3. So we're going to get rid of all of this. Actually, this would probably be a better way to do it. So for the first half of this drum loop, we're going to keep the snare on 2 and 4. We're going to keep everything else the same, except now we're just putting the snare on 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so snare on 2 and 4 for the first 2 measures, and then it's just on the 3 for the last 2 measures. Everything else is the same, and I think you'll be able to tell what is happening. I think you'll find that the first 2 is going to feel a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive, if you will, and then on the second half, it's going to seem like it slows down, even though everything else is exactly the same. All right, so you heard the difference there. If you have the snare just on 3, it's going to feel a little bit slower, a little bit more, I don't know what a good word was, slow, really. It's probably just the best way to say it. We'll play it one more time for you, but really pay attention. It seems like it's going fast, and then all of a sudden it seems to slow down, but nothing else has changed. It's still the same tempo. It's still the same pattern on everything else. The only thing that's changed is where we're putting the snare. And that even if you were to do an 8th note pattern, it would still be the same kind of deal. So we'll do the same thing here, where we do play the same groove, but now it's an 8th note pattern on the hi-hats, but the snares are going to be in the same spot. All right. And so you start to get an idea about how to put together very simple drum grooves. What you can also do with the drums is use crashes, toms, rides. There's other elements besides just kick, snare, and hi-hat, although these tend to be the main elements for the most part for most songs. There are various ways you can use crashes. So, for instance, if we were to take our first hi-hat hit, instead of make it a crash, it'll feel like the crash is going to add a sense of excitement to the drum loop. You can also add in your open hi-hats, and this is just to add kind of some variation to your drum loop. So I'm just picking a random hi-hat and moving it to this open hi-hat sound. All right, and that just adds a little bit of variety to your drum loop. And then you can have another crash happen here. And this time we'll make the open hi-hat there. All right. And so using crashes and open hi-hats are ways to add variety to your song. You can also, if you wanted to, have a ride groove, and that's going to make the song sound like it's a little bit more open. So now instead of being on the hi-hat, we've put this timekeeper on the ride. And that's just, again, another way to add variety. So, for instance, in a song, you may have the verses be on the hi-hat and the choruses be on the ride, or vice versa. There's no wrong or right way to do it. You can even have the open hi-hat going the whole time here if you wanted to add a little bit of excitement to your song. All right, and you can, and the open hi-hat adds a little bit of intensity to the drums. It makes them sound a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more big, if you will. So again, you can use that on a chorus, a verse, however you want to do it. But this is just kind of different ways to make your drums exciting, different, whatever you want to call it, adding interest. We'll go ahead and put this back on the hi-hat for now. And then the last thing we're going to go over today is toms. And toms are, generally speaking, used to do what are called fills. And a fill is just kind of a way to break up a beat. Oftentimes they're used at the end of a section or the beginning of a section to introduce another section or another part of the song, and it's just a way to break up the drum groove a little bit. And the toms can really go anywhere. You can have them replace these snare hits. If you wanted to, you could have them just have complete quarter note all the way through. You can have them there's no wrong way when it comes to drum tom fills. You can have add rhythm elements to it if you wanted to. You can have eighth notes and 16th notes. There's no wrong or right way to do it. It's just whatever is giving you the concept that you want. But it's a way to break up the beat, make it different, and signify that you're moving into another section of the song, even if that's like the first half of a verse to the second half of a verse, or going from the verse to the chorus, or adding interest within the chorus. Maybe you want to emphasize certain words within the verse of the chorus. You can use crashes or toms to emphasize things if you want to. However you want to use it, you can. A good way to figure out how to use toms or crashes is to listen to other people and how they use them, and you can start to kind of figure out what you want them to do. You can also use toms to do a groove if you want. So actually, let's go back here. So instead of having the hi-hat playing this constant beat, you can actually have the tom do it. So all I'm doing is moving what was played on the hi-hat to this floor tom. Oh, yeah, gotta put those snares back in. And so that's another way you can use them. You can use them to hold that hi-hat. There's no wrong or right way when it comes to this. It's just knowing what you want to be keeping your time, whether that's a hi-hat, a ride, a tom. It's knowing when to use toms, crashes, etc. to emphasize what you want to have happen at whatever spot. But again, there's no wrong or right way to do it. You can have an entire song be the same groove the entire way through, or you can break it up. You can have like what we did here, where this might be a verse section, and then this maybe is your chorus section or whatever. Maybe it's the second half of your verse. Maybe it's a bridge, but you can add some interest, and you can change up the patterns you're using between sections if you want to, with the kick, however you want to do it. It's just adding variety essentially, but you don't have to. If you want it to be kind of the same thing over and over and over and over again, you can. If you want it to change constantly, you can. There's no wrong or right way, but these are some just general concepts of how you might go about using drums and how you can come up with some of these drum patterns. All right. And then I did mention we could touch on an electronic drum kit. And it's very similar to what a acoustic drum kit is going to sound like. The only difference is we're using different sounds. So for this, we're going to use this software here, or this sample library, if you will. And I'm going to arbitrarily just choose a random kind of kit here, and then this is the same thing. And so if we were to bring up our piano roll, for this, let's try this one more time. So same kind of principle. You find out where your kick, your snare sounds, your hi-hatty sounds are, and you can start with this hi-hat. And we can give it a eighth note feel for now. This can be a 16th, it can be a quarter, it can be whatever you want. There's no wrong or right. It's just kind of whatever you want it to, the vibe you want to give it. Oop. I put that on the 3, not on the 4. There we go. And then you can just have that repeat. And the fun thing with electronic drum kits is oftentimes they're going to have some fun sounds. So you can alternate things. You can have different sounds happening at different times. And you just move things. To fun spots, like whatever's going to sound good. And you can actually add extra snares if you want. And you have fun with it. Like the snare does not always have to be on 2 and 4. You can add extra snare hits in, and depending on where you put it, is going to give it a different feel or a different whatever. But 2 and 4 is a great place to start, or putting it just on 3, again, is a good place to start. But you can always add things. You can always be creative with what you're doing with things. And if we were to change this from whatever it was to another random one, whatever this origami kit is going to be a different sound. And you can have fun with it, you know what I mean? I'm just kind of randomly choosing different kits, but like this is all staying the same. whatever's going to get you the sound you're looking for, really, at the end of the day. Electronic drum kit, electric drum sounds, just going to have more variety than an acoustic drum kit sound, although there's a lot of variety in acoustic drum kit sounds as well. But you can get some funky stuff. It's whatever kind of song you want, whatever vibe you're trying to set. Maybe it has something to do with the genre you're going for. You can just have some fun with it. Let your imagination go wild. There's no wrong or right, really, at the end of the day. When it comes to any of this stuff, it's just a matter of, is it sounding the way you want it to sound? And you can use these tools we've gone over, using the 8th notes, the 16th notes, snare on 2 and 4. These are great starting points, but they're not the only way to do it. You can feel free to have some fun with this and play with it, and see what kind of things you can come up with. And you can just have that repeat if you want. You can even slow it down using your tempo. So right now it's at 120, but we can maybe speed this up to 150 and see what that sounds like. Or you can slow it down. Let's go to, say, 100. And you can have fun with it. You can take that drum groove, and then you can put chords and a melody over it, and all of a sudden you've got yourself a bop. So, anyways, I hope this has all been helpful. We're going to go over probably some more. At this point, I think we're done with the basics of production. Anything at this point is going to get more into the intermediate or advanced concepts of music production. So we might get into things next week, such as signal flow, or maybe some advanced theory, go over different types of keys instead of just sticking to major keys. Maybe we'll get into concepts of minor keys or get into chord extensions, things like that. But at this point, if you've been following the series thus far, you should be able to put everything together to make a song happen. Even if it's a basic, simple song, you should have enough knowledge at this point to be able to put together something. So we're going to do our 1, 5, 6, 4 from last week, so you can get a kind of an idea of and why don't we give it just a bit of rhythm like we did last week. And you can see how this is all coming together. Oop. And that works whether you're using this electronic kit or whether you're using this acoustic kit. And then you can put melodies to it. You can do whatever you want. Music is a beautiful thing. You can get creative with it. I'm just trying to give you some starting basic concepts in order to get you kind of the basic knowledge that you would need in order to start putting some of this together and start making your own music. But be creative, have fun with it, and that's the most important thing. Anyways, I hope this has all been helpful, and I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you later. Bye.